The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It came down in quiet sheets outside the coffee shop window, a gray blur against the glass as the world outside dimmed. Inside, the hum of espresso machines and clinking ceramic cups carried on. Life moved forward for everyone in the room except for the two people sitting at the corner table who hadn't spoken in nearly 5 minutes. Isabel stared into her coffee, fingers wrapped tightly around the warm cup. She didn't look at him, not yet, not when she could still feel the sting of his last words lingering between them like invisible smoke. Michael sat across from her. Tall, quiet, his strong hands resting uselessly on the table. He hadn't touched his drink. His brown eyes watched her face the way someone might watch a fire slowly die helplessly. Painfully, not knowing how to save it without burning themselves. "You're not saying anything," she finally murmured, her voice barely audible over the gentle storm outside. "I don't know what to say anymore," he replied, and that sentence, simple, soft, sounded more final than any goodbye. They had been together for nearly 4 years. From the outside, they were the perfect couple. She was a creative solo freelance editor who wore glasses too big for her face and read poetry under tree shade. He was a civil engineer, precise, grounded, logical to a fault. Their differences had once fascinated them. Now, they'd become reasons to retreat. So what changed? What made two people who had once believed they were soulmates now sit across from each other like strangers with shared memories? It didn't happen in one day. That's the hardest part to explain. No one slams the door on love overnight. It's a slow fade. A quiet unraveling. The tiny things that go unspoken. The smiles that become forced. The texts that get shorter. The hugs that feel obligatory. Sometimes, love ends not because it wasn't real, but because fear speaks louder. And that's what no one tells you. There are reasons people leave even when they still love. Not because the love wasn't strong, but because something else was stronger. Fear, hurt, guilt, pride, silence. Michael wasn't a man who walked away easily, but over the last few months, something had shifted in him. He no longer reached for Isabel first. He stopped saying "I miss you" just because. He was present, but emotionally distant. Like his body stayed, but his heart was waiting at the door. Isabel noticed. She didn't cry, not at first. Instead, she questioned herself. Blamed herself. Was she asking for too much? Was she becoming a version of herself he didn't want anymore? And when the distance got worse, she did what many people do, she pretended not to notice. Because sometimes pretending feels safer than confronting the truth. But truth has a way of surfacing. And tonight, sitting in that coffee shop, she couldn't ignore it anymore. "I feel like I'm trying to hold something that's already slipping through my fingers," she said suddenly, voice trembling despite her effort to sound calm. Michael looked down, eyes shadowed with something between sorrow and fear. "I know. I feel it too." She stared at him. "Then why don't you fight for us anymore?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window where a couple walked by under a shared umbrella, laughing, heads close together. The irony stung. "I don't know how to," he admitted finally. "Every time I try, it's like there's a wall I built, and I can't climb over it anymore." "Then why are you still here?" she whispered. He looked her in the eyes. "Because I still love you." Her breath caught. And there it was, the cruelest part of all. Loving someone isn't always enough to stay. She blinked rapidly. Then, tell me why it feels like you're halfway out the door. If you still love me, why does this feel like goodbye?" Michael didn't speak. Because deep down, he didn't know how to tell her that sometimes people leave not because the love is gone, but because they've convinced themselves they don't deserve it. He had been pulling away because he was scared of failing her, scared of becoming like his father, who had once walked out on his mother with the same silence that now echoed between them. His love for Isabel wasn't the problem. His past was. And that's reason one people leave, because they don't believe they are enough. But he couldn't explain that. Not yet. Not tonight. So instead, he stood up, and that's when Isabel said something that changed everything. "Before you leave, can you just be honest with me? All the way. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't protect me. I don't want comfort, I want the truth." Michael looked at her like someone who had just stepped out of a dream. Vulnerable, cornered, exposed. Then he took a breath, and he sat back down, because deep down, he didn't want to leave. And that's where the story truly begins. Not with a breakup, but with two people standing at the edge of emotional collapse, trying to find a way back to each other without a map. In the chapters to come, we'll explore 6 reasons why people walk away from love they still feel. Real reasons. painful reasons, but also the reasons they come back. Because sometimes the person you think is walking away is just waiting for you to stop them. Michael's voice was quiet, as though speaking any louder might crack the moment wide open. I used to think love would fix everything. He looked up at Isabel, his dark eyes tired but sincere, as if holding back years of unspoken truths. She didn't interrupt him, not yet. She just watched him, her fingers still wrapped around her coffee like it was the only warmth she had left. I thought if I loved someone hard enough, I could be the kind of man they needed me to be. Isabel's heart sank slowly into her chest. He wasn't trying to leave because he stopped loving her. He was trying to leave because somewhere deep down, he didn't think he deserved to be loved. Michael had always been strong on the outside. He knew how to build cities, hold up bridges, fix anything physical. But when it came to himself, his own heart, his past, his shame, he had no blueprint. He was the eldest son of a man who walked out on his family in the middle of a Thursday afternoon and never returned. Michael had been 13. He remembered the silence, how his mother just stared at the wall for hours. How Michael took over everything: grocery lists, bedtime routines for his younger brother, even lying to the school about why their dad didn't come to career day. He learned early that strength meant swallowing pain. That real men didn't cry. They endured. But the boy who had kept the house running was still inside him, exhausted, ashamed, and never once told that he could just rest, or break, or be vulnerable. So when Isabel came into his life, with her gentle hands and soft laughter, her emotional honesty and her poetry and her way of seeing through him, it scared him, because he didn't know how to be seen without falling apart. Isabel had her own history too. She grew up in a quiet, intellectual home. Her parents were readers, soft-spoken, emotionally distant, in that polite, well-educated way that still stings years later. She was the child who learned to feel everything alone. The kind of girl who cried in libraries because no one ever asked her what was wrong at home. When she met Michael, she was drawn to his steadiness, his quiet loyalty, the way he listened before speaking, and always showed up on time. For someone like her who never had a safe emotional home, he felt like one. But love, she learned, wasn't just about safety. It was about showing each other the parts you were afraid to love in yourself. And lately, Michael had started hiding those parts. He laughed less, avoided eye contact during deep conversations. He stopped reading the poems she sent him late at night. And when she asked if something was wrong, he always said, "I'm just tired." That's what scared her most, how easy it was for him to disconnect. Not because he was cruel, but because he didn't believe he was worth holding on to. "Do you remember the cabin?" she asked softly now. Michael looked up. "Which one?" "The one in Vermont. 3 years ago. It snowed the first night, and we made pancakes on that broken stove." He gave a ghost of a smile. "You made pancakes? I almost set the cabin on fire." She smiled faintly. "That weekend was the first time I let someone see all of me. My weird habits, my anxiety, my silence. I loved you more after that," he whispered. "Then why won't you let me do the same for you?" He didn't answer. His throat tightened too much. Because that was the second reason. Reason 2. People leave because they're afraid of being seen. Michael had loved Isabel the moment he saw Herb, but love had never felt this intimate before. So exposed. So raw. He didn't know how to sit with someone who loved the cracks in him he'd spent a lifetime hiding. He stood again. "Michael," she said, panic rising. "I just need some air." He walked out into the rain. Outside, the city smelled of asphalt and old leaves. The rain had softened to a mist, but the cold bit into his skin. He leaned against a pole and closed his eyes. He didn't want to lose her. He also didn't know how to stay. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't lying. He wasn't falling out of love. He was just exhausted from trying to be someone he wasn't sure she needed anymore. He had spent his entire life being the strong one. And now, when he felt weakest, he didn't know how to ask for help. He didn't know that Isabel didn't need him to be perfect. She just needed him to be present, inside. Isabel wiped her eyes and stared at the door. Something in her heart told her to run after him. Not in desperation, but in courage. Because love doesn't always win when you wait. Sometimes you have to fight for it. Softly, bravely. Even if it terrifies you. She stood up, left cash on the table, and followed him outside into the cold. As she stepped onto the wet sidewalk, she saw him leaning against the pole, face tilted toward the sky like he was asking the universe for a sign. She stepped toward him. He turned, surprised, and then, she said the one thing that pierced through every wall inside him. I don't need the strong version of you, Michael. I just need the real one. And for the first time in years, Michael let his guard fall. Just enough to let her see the truth behind his silence. Michael didn't flinch when Isabel stepped toward him in the rain. He just looked at her really, looked at her the way someone does when they're afraid they've already ruined the one good thing. They had left. She wasn't crying anymore. There was strength in her expression now, not anger, not desperation, but something quieter. Something that said, I'm here, but I won't keep chasing someone who's running from himself. The silence stretched between them. Michael lowered his gaze, breathing heavily through his nose, like he was trying to keep everything inside from slipping out. You think I don't want to be here, he said slowly, but I do. Then what are you so afraid of? She asked. He turned away. That I'll lose myself again. Before Isabel, Michael had been in a long relationship that nearly broke him. Her name was Clara. He never talked about her much, not because he still loved her, but because the emotional damage she left behind had taught him how to shut down without warning. With Clara, love had come with terms, conditions, control disguised as passion. She'd wanted all of him, but didn't know what to do with it. Slowly, she chipped away at his independence. Told him what to wear, how to talk, who to spend time with, and every time he protested, she made him feel like he was the villain. By the time it ended, Michael didn't recognize himself. And now, even though Isabel was nothing like Clara, he still carried the fear that opening up would cost him his identity. It wasn't rational, but trauma rarely is. Isabel watched him now, unsure how far to reach, how much to give, how long to wait. You're not him, she said finally. Michael turned back, confused. What? My dad? He used to disappear inside his own head for days. Not physically, but emotionally. He'd be there eating dinner, mowing the lawn, but his soul was somewhere else. My mom stopped asking him to come back after a while. And I think that's when she started to disappear too. Michael looked shaken. You think I'm like that? I think, she said, stepping closer. You don't realize that pulling away to protect yourself is the same thing as leaving, even if your body's still here. His jaw tightened. Not in defense but in recognition. Because she was right. Later, that night, Michael sat alone in his apartment. The lights were low, the streets outside blurred by the misty rain. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, knees bent, holding a photo of him and Isabel from their first trip together. It was a stupid selfie in a sunflower field. He was sunburnt. She had dirt on her nose, and they were both laughing like idiots. But there was something in their eyes, joy, lightness, hope, a version of themselves untouched by fear. He wanted that back. But how? He'd spent so much time trying to protect the version of himself he built after regarded, composed, always in control that he didn't realize Isabel wasn't asking for all of him, she was just asking for the real parts. Meanwhile, Isabel sat on her balcony wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through an old playlist he'd made for her the first year they dated. It was full of soft indie tracks, romantic instrumentals, and songs with lyrics that only made sense in the context of their shared memories. As one soft acoustic guitar song faded out, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. I'm not okay, but I want to try. Can I see you tomorrow? She didn't reply immediately. She needed time. Not to punish him but to remember what it felt like to choose herself, too. That next morning, Michael walked into his office and everything felt too loud. The mechanical rhythm of keyboards, the shrill phones, the dull drone of fluorescent lights. He stared at his monitor, but his mind was miles away. That's when his friend and coworker, Aaron, stepped into his cubicle. Rough night. Michael gave a half smile. Something like that. Aaron sat on the edge of his desk. You want advice you didn't ask for. Michael looked up. Sure. Aaron leaned in. You're not the first guy to sabotage something good just because you're scared of repeating your past. But Isabel's not Clara. And you're not the man you were back then either. Michael blinked. I know, Aaron added, because I watched you build this relationship like it mattered. Don't let your trauma become your compass. By the time Michael left work, he had made a decision. Not just to show up but to speak the truth, no matter how messy it sounded. That evening, Isabel sat in the cafe alone, staring at the door, and then he walked in. No umbrella, hair damp, a nervous look on his face. He sat across from her like he had 100 times before. But this time, he didn't pretend. I've been running, he admitted, voice hoarse. Not from you, from myself. From the part of me I buried after Clara. I thought being in love meant becoming invisible again. I thought if I let you see the parts of me I hated, you'd stop loving me. She exhaled slowly. I never needed you to be perfect, she said. I needed you to be honest. He reached across the table, hesitant. She didn't pull away. And that's the third reason people leave someone they love. They're afraid love will erase them. But real love doesn't erase. It expands. It doesn't ask you to become smaller, it invites you to be seen. Michael still had healing to do. Isabel still had boundaries to keep. But for the first time, they were no longer talking around the pain, they were meeting it, together. And that changed everything. The cafe had emptied out. Only a few quiet customers remained, hunched over laptops or lost in paperback novels as the rain whispered steadily outside. Isabel hadn't touched her tea. Michael's hand still rested between them, open and unsure. She hadn't taken it, not yet, and for the first time, it wasn't because she didn't want to. It was because she didn't know if she could cross that bridge again without losing herself in the process. This wasn't about Clara anymore, or Michael's past, or even the emotional distance he had carried like armor. It was about something she'd felt growing inside her for months, something she couldn't ignore anymore, something like fear but sharper. She looked at him now and whispered, "What if I'm not the same person who waited for you to come back?" Michael flinched. "What do you mean I mean? I've changed too, Michael." Over the past few weeks, while Michael had pulled away, Isabel had been finding pieces of herself again. She'd started writing again, stories she used to bury in notebooks out of fear they'd never be good enough. She'd started spending time alone, not because she had no one else, but because she wanted to remember who she was before loving someone became a full-time job. And she realized something difficult. Love is not always about waiting. Sometimes, love is choosing yourself even while your heart aches for someone else. "I used to be afraid of losing you," she said. "So I shrank to make space for your silence. I excused the late replies, the distant stares. I told myself you were processing, or tired, or overwhelmed. But deep down, I was scared that if I demanded more, you'd leave." Michael's heart dropped. "I never wanted you to feel that way," he said, voice cracking. "I know," she replied. "But you still let it happen." He didn't try to defend himself. That was growth. "I don't want to leave you," she continued. "But I also can't lose the woman I've finally started becoming. The woman who knows she deserves someone who shows up." Michael looked her in the eyes, full of guilt and fear. "And if that person is me now, what then?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," she whispered. That's when her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her sister. "Don't forget Mom's dinner tonight. Starts at 8. Please come. She misses you." She stared at it for a long moment. Michael noticed. "Family thing." She nodded. "I haven't been home in months. Because of us. Because I didn't want them to see me falling apart." Michael's chest tightened. "I didn't realize how much I'd taken from you." Isabel looked at him this time, not with blame, but with a kind of heartbreak only love could cause. "You didn't take it," she said. "I gave it freely. Because I believed in you. In us. I just never imagined I'd have to believe alone." The silence now felt suffocating. "I need time," she said finally, "to figure out who I am now, and whether the version of you standing in front of me fits into that life." She stood. Michael stood too. This time, neither begged, neither stormed out, neither collapsed. Because when love is real, even the most painful moments are handled with care. He nodded. "Can I call you tomorrow?" She hesitated. "Then maybe." And she walked out into the rain. Michael didn't follow. He sat back down. For the first time in his life, he realized that wanting someone wasn't enough, not if he couldn't meet them where they stood now. That night, Isabel sat at her mother's dinner table for the first time in months. Her sister laughed across from her. Her mother made too much pasta like always, and the room felt familiar, but different. She was quieter, more guarded, not broken, but rebuilding. That night, Michael stood in his apartment, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, and for once, he didn't see Clara's ex. Or a man trying to be who everyone else needed. He saw a man who might be too late, and that's the fourth reason people leave. The ones they love. Because they've changed and they're not sure love fits anymore. Change isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's slow, quiet. It slips in between long silences and unanswered questions until one day, you look at the person across the table and wonder when the love you built started feeling like a place you couldn't stay. And now, Isabel was standing at the edge of that question. Would she choose the version of herself that waited? Or the one that walked away, still in love but no longer willing to settle for a half-held heart? 2 days passed. Isabel didn't return Michael's messages, not because she was angry, but because she needed clarity. Space. She spent her mornings journaling, her nights sitting with thoughts that had been building for years. The silence wasn't cold, it was necessary. Michael, on the other hand, had been walking through his days in a fog. He went to work, answered emails, nodded through meetings, but his mind was locked on her last words. What if I'm not the same person who waited for you to come back? He wanted to believe he could meet her where she was now. But the truth was, he didn't even know who he was anymore. And then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after their confrontation, at the cafe, Isabel received a letter. Not a message, not a call, a real physical letter. Slid under her apartment door in a plain white envelope. There was no name on the front, just her address in Michael's handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it. But what she read wasn't an apology, it was a confession. Michael's words on the page were raw, unfiltered, vulnerable in a way he had never dared to be allowed. Before you, there was someone else who loved me. And I hurt her because I didn't know how to love myself. I thought what happened with Clara was the only damage I carried, but that wasn't true. After her, there was someone else. Someone kind. Someone real. I left before things got serious, but she didn't deserve to be a casualty of my confusion. Isabel's breath caught in her throat. Her name was Sienna. We were never officially together, but we were close. Right before I met you, I disappeared on her. She tried to reach out, and I ignored her. I didn't think it mattered then, but I realize now. It was the beginning of this pattern, of running, hiding, protecting myself at any cost. Last week, after we spoke, she contacted me again. Out of nowhere. Isabel's heart stopped. She saw one of our photos online. I didn't know she still followed me. She asked if we were okay. If you knew who I used to be, the words blurred on the page as tears welled in Isabel's eyes. She hadn't expected this. Michael had always seemed emotionally reserved. But honest, I'm telling you this not because I owe her anything, but because I owe you everything. I'm afraid, Isabel. I'm afraid I haven't changed enough. I'm afraid that some part of me still finds comfort in disappearing. But I want you to know all of me. Not just the man who loves you, but the man who's still learning how. Whatever you decide, know this. I've never loved anyone the way I love you, and I'm willing to do the work, even if it means starting over with nothing. The paper trembled in her hands. A strange ache settled in her chest. This wasn't just about Michael's past, it was about the shadow of it, how close it had come to repeating itself. How easily it might have dragged her into the same cycle if he hadn't stopped to face it. He had never cheated. He had never lied to her about who Sienna was. But he had buried the truth because a part of him was still hiding. And that, more than anything, was the twist Isabel hadn't seen coming. Because suddenly, the choice wasn't just about loving Michael. It was about whether she could trust a man still figuring out how to trust himself. Could she open her heart again, knowing he had once run from love that looked a lot like hers? Could she believe that his feelings for her were stronger than the reflex to disappear? That night, Isabel stood on the rooftop of her apartment building, watching the lights of the city flicker like stars. She thought about the version of herself from a year ago, romantic, trusting, wide-eyed. That girl would have rushed back into Michael's arms the second he knocked. But this version, she wanted something deeper, safer, realer. A love that didn't require her to sacrifice her peace for someone else's healing. And then, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Isabel, I know this is strange. My name is Sienna. I shouldn't be reaching out, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry for any hurt my message may have caused. I never meant to come between you and Michael. I only reached out because I wanted him to know he mattered once. That he wasn't just the broken pieces of someone else's story. He's trying, you know. I can see that now. I just thought you deserved to know the full picture. He's lucky to have someone like you. Isabel stared at the message for a long time. The words weren't bitter. They weren't jealous. They were honest, and that honesty made everything harder because now, the ball was in her court. This wasn't about betrayal anymore, it was about what she believed about healing. Forgiveness and whether people could truly change when given the space to try. She didn't know what she would do next. But she knew the stakes had never been higher, because sometimes the person we love most is still capable of hurting us the deepest, and still, somehow, they may be the only one who's ever tried to love us. Right, Isabel didn't sleep that night. She paced the apartment in silence, rereading Michael's letter more times than she could count. Every sentence felt like a whisper from the version of him she thought she'd lost. Vulnerable, raw, honest in a way that both broke her and brought her closer to him. By morning, the storm outside had cleared, but inside her chest, it still raged. Love had never looked this complicated to her. It had always been either you stay or you go. But now she realized that real love wasn't black and white. It was made in the spaces in between. In the hesitation before forgiveness. In the courage it takes to trust someone again after they've failed you with their silence. And Michael, he hadn't betrayed her, but he had let her carry the weight of their love alone for too long. That morning, she didn't write him back. She showed up. Not at his apartment, not at the coffee shop, but at the small bookstore, where they had met by accident almost 2 years ago. The one where she had been reaching for a poetry collection, and he had grabbed the same book. The one where he had nervously offered to buy it, for her, and she'd laughed and said, "Only if you promise not to analyze every line." He had smiled then, shy but sincere. She hadn't seen him smile like that in a long time. Michael was there before her. He sat on the bench near the back wall, same as before, with that same worn-out copy of Love in the Time of Distance in his hands. He didn't see her at first. He was rereading a passage one he'd once highlighted for her. The truest kind of love is the one that survives silence, fear, and the weight of who we used to be. She stepped closer, and this time, he looked up, not startled, not surprised, as if he'd known, deep down, that she'd come. "I didn't come to forgive you," Isabel said softly. Michael nodded. "Okay, I didn't come to forget what happened either." Another nod. "No defense. I came to ask you something." He stood, slowly, uncertain. She looked him in the eyes, and said, "Are you willing to fight for this, even if it means unlearning everything that once kept you safe?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, voice steady. "Even if it takes the rest of my life." And just like that, her shoulders dropped for the first time in weeks. Because she wasn't asking for a perfect man, she was asking for a present one. They sat down together. No holding hands, no dramatic music, just quiet understanding between two people who had seen the worst parts of each other, and still found something worth saving. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small. A key. "I cleared out the guest room," he said gently, "not to ask you to move in, but because I realized I'd built this home alone, and left no room for us." Isabel looked down at the key. Not to a house, but maybe, finally, to a version of love they could both live in. Later that night, as they walked the long way home under a sky of fading clouds and soft moonlight, Isabel asked the question she'd been holding inside. "Do you think people ever really change?" Michael looked ahead, thoughtful. "I think people remember who they want to be. And then, if they're lucky, they meet someone who gives them permission to become it." She squeezed his hand. "Not a fairy tale ending, but maybe beginning. And that's the 6th reason people leave the ones they love. Because sometimes, it's the only way to return stronger." It had been 3 weeks since Isabel and Michael met at the bookstore. There was no dramatic reunion, no tearful embrace in the rain. Just a slow and deliberate coming together of two people who had finally learned how to meet each other where they were. Not where they wished each other to be. Michael didn't flood her inbox with messages. He didn't rush her with expectations. He simply showed up on time, present, consistent. Isabel noticed the difference. He listened more. He stopped disappearing during hard conversations. He even started therapy not as a grand gesture but because he admitted he needed help understanding himself before he could love someone the way they deserved. And Isabel. She gave herself permission to trust him again, little by little. She didn't abandon the woman she had become in the time apart. She brought her into the relationship. That changed everything. One crisp Sunday morning, they sat together on the park bench near Isabel's apartment. It was the same bench she used to sit on, a lawn journal in hand, heart heavy with unspoken pain. Now Michael was beside her. They weren't talking about deep things, not this time. They were laughing about a dog that refused to let go of a stick twice its size, about the old man in neon green running shorts doing yoga in the grass, about how she still hated his weird obsession with pineapple on pizza. It was simple, it was ordinary, and it felt more intimate than all the love letters in the world, because finally, they felt safe. At one point, Michael turned to her and said, "I don't think I ever knew what real love looked like before you." Isabel looked down, smiled. "You just didn't know how to receive it." she replied. He nodded. That too. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable this time. Then Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. Isabel raised an eyebrow. I wrote you something, he said. Suddenly, shy, she unfolded it. At the top were 6 bolded lines. 6 reasons people leave the one they love, but underneath each one, he had rewritten it. Point 1. They're afraid of being truly seen. Dow. I let you see every part of me, even the ones I never liked. 2. They think love will fix them. Now I know love doesn't fix you, do. But love helps. 3. They don't know how to ask for what they need. Now I ask, even when I'm scared. 4. They change on, forget to tell the other person. Now I grow, and I bring you with me. 5. They're haunted by their past. Now I face it, because you reminded me, I'm not that man anymore. 6. They're afraid love will cost them too much. But now, I know real love doesn't cost you who you are. It teaches you who you can be. Isabel was quiet for a long moment. She didn't cry, she just folded the paper back up, tucked it into her coat pocket, and rested her head on his shoulder. You're not perfect, she whispered. I'm not trying to be, he said softly. Just trying to be here. That was all she ever wanted. Not flowers, not promises, just presence, consistency, a man who was no longer running from himself. And that's how the story ends, not with fireworks, but with a sunrise. 2 imperfect people. Choosing each other. Choosing growth. Choosing love that isn't always easy, but always worth it, because in the end, people don't leave love because it's broken. They leave when they feel invisible in it. And sometimes, the most radical act of love is learning how to stay. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments below.